The air hung heavy over Hemlock Creek. The sky, once a cheerful blue, had morphed into a brooding canvas of grays and purples. An unnatural hush fell over the usually vibrant town. The townsfolk, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, retreated indoors, their laughter and chatter fading into nervous whispers. The wind, a low growl at first, picked up, whipping through the empty streets, carrying with it the scent of rain and an unsettling chill. It rattled the windows of the quaint houses, tugging at their shutters as if trying to break free from the ominous silence that had enveloped Hemlock Creek. The sky grew darker, the clouds swirling into menacing shapes. The storm was coming. It was the eve of the annual Scarecrow Festival, an event that usually filled the town with joy and laughter. But this year, the festival's preparations were overshadowed by a palpable sense of foreboding. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, the Scarecrow Festival commenced, albeit with a subdued air. Colorful scarecrows, crafted with care by the townsfolk, lined the streets, their painted smiles a stark contrast to the apprehensive faces around them. But this year, the scarecrows seemed different. Their straw-stuffed bodies appearing more menacing, their painted smiles more like grimaces. The wind buffeted their ragged clothes, making them sway and twitch in a way that sent shivers down the spines of the onlookers. At the edge of the town, where the cornfields swayed ominously under the darkening sky, stood a scarecrow unlike any other. Its head, a hollowed-out pumpkin, was carved with a cruel mockery of a smile, the flickering candlelight within casting dancing shadows that stretched and contorted in the growing darkness. This scarecrow, crafted by Old Man Hemlock, a recluse who lived on the outskirts of town, was a masterpiece of eerie craftsmanship. Tom, a young boy of 12, always looked forward to the Scarecrow Festival. However, this year, even Tom couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled upon the town. His gaze kept returning to the tall, menacing figure at the edge of the cornfield. The Scarecrow's obsidian eyes seemed to bore into him, making him feel exposed and vulnerable. He couldn't explain it, but he felt an overwhelming urge to get away from the Scarecrow as if it were a source of some unseen danger. As the storm drew closer, the wind howled through the town, tearing at the decorations and whipping the Scarecrow's clothes into a frenzy. The sky grew darker, the last rays of sunlight swallowed by the approaching tempest. Tom, separated from his parents in the commotion, found himself alone near the edge of the cornfield, his heart pounding in his chest. And then, he saw it. The Scarecrow at the edge of the cornfield was moving. Even before the storm broke, whispers circulated among the townsfolk, whispers about Old Man Hemlock and his unsettling creation. Old Man Hemlock, a solitary figure who lived in a dilapidated cabin beyond the cornfields, was shrouded in mystery and whispered rumors. Some said he was a skilled healer, others a powerful sorcerer. This year his scarecrow, taller and more menacing than ever before, had become an object of both fascination and dread. The way its obsidian eyes seemed to follow them, the cruel mockery of a smile etched into its pumpkin head, it all spoke of something unnatural, something malevolent. The storm brewing on the horizon seemed to amplify their unease. As the first drops of rain began to fall, heavier and colder than usual, a palpable sense of dread descended upon Hemlock Creek. The storm, which had been gathering its strength for hours, finally broke over Hemlock Creek with a fury that shook the very foundations of the town. Torrential rain lashed down, each drop exploding against the rooftops and cobblestone streets like tiny hammer blows. The wind, now a raging beast, roared through the town, ripping off shingles, uprooting trees and sending debris flying through the air like deadly projectiles. The power lines, unable to withstand the onslaught, snapped, plunging the town into darkness. The only illumination came from flashes of lightning that split the sky, momentarily revealing the terrified faces of the townsfolk peering out from behind their boarded-up windows. The storm, usually a predictable force of nature, had become something monstrous, something malevolent. The sound of the storm was deafening, a cacophony of howling wind, crashing thunder, and the relentless pounding of rain. And yet, above the din, another sound could be heard, a sound that chilled the blood and sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to venture outside. It was a low growl, guttural and menacing, emanating from the direction of the cornfields. Tom watched in disbelief and growing horror as the scarecrow at the edge of the cornfield moved. Its head, the grotesque pumpkin with its malevolent grin, slowly turned towards him, the flickering candlelight within its hollow shell casting eerie shadows that danced and writhed in the wind. Then with a slowness that belied its size, the scarecrow started to move towards him. Its limbs, fashioned from gnarled branches, creaked and groaned with each step, the sound amplified by the howling wind. The straw that stuffed its body rustled ominously as if something alive were moving within. Terror, cold and paralyzing, gripped Tom's heart. He wanted to run, to scream for help, but his legs felt like lead and his voice caught in his throat. He was frozen in place, his eyes fixed on the approaching scarecrow, its menacing form growing larger with each step. The rain, driven by the wind, lashed against him, but he barely registered the cold. All he could see was the scarecrow, its eyes glowing with an unholy light, its grin widening into a grotesque mockery of a smile. News of the moving scarecrow spread through the terrified town like wildfire, passed from neighbor to neighbor in hushed whispers. Fear, potent and primal, gripped the hearts of the townsfolk. They huddled in their homes, barring their doors and windows, praying for the storm to pass and for the nightmare to end. The storm raged on, mimicking the terror that had overtaken Hemlock Creek. Lightning flashed, illuminating the sky in brief, terrifying bursts, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. Thunder roared, each boom shaking the very foundations of their homes, and through it all, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the streets, drawing closer with every deafening thud. The Scarecrow Festival, once a joyous celebration, had become a night of unimaginable horror. Fear threatened to consume Tom, but as the monstrous scarecrow lumbered closer, a spark of defiance ignited within him. He couldn't explain it, but he knew he couldn't just stand there and let this creature take him. He had to act, to fight back, even if it seemed futile. His heart pounded against his ribs, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but his resolve solidified with each terrifying step the scarecrow took towards him. He remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell him, stories of ancient evils and the power of faith. She had given him a small pouch filled with dried sage, a symbol of purification and protection. Clutching the pouch of sage tightly in his hand, Tom closed his eyes and whispered a silent prayer. He prayed for courage, for strength, for protection against the evil that threatened to engulf him. And as he prayed, a strange sense of calm washed over him, a feeling of peace amidst the raging storm. The scarecrow stood before Tom, its presence a suffocating wave of malice and dread. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, the stench of rotting vegetation clinging to the creature like a shroud. Tom, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum, held his ground. He knew that he was no match for this creature's raw power, but he refused to give in to the paralyzing grip of fear. With a swift motion, Tom tore open the pouch and flung the dried sage at the scarecrow's feet. The scarecrow, caught off guard by the sudden assault, stumbled back, its glowing eyes flickering in surprise. "Begone, creature of darkness!" Tom shouted, his voice surprisingly strong and steady despite the fear that coursed through him. The scarecrow let out a guttural roar, a sound filled with rage and frustration. The scarecrow, enraged by Tom's defiance and the pungent aroma of the sage, lashed out with a speed that belied its size. Tom, his reflexes honed by years of playing in the surrounding woods, ducked just in time, the creature's hand whizzing past his head. Scrambling back, Tom pressed himself against the rough bark of a nearby oak tree, his heart pounding against his ribs. He could smell the creature's fetid breath, a noxious combination of rotting vegetation and something ancient and evil. But Tom refused to yield. Taking a deep breath, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn book of prayers his grandmother had given him. Holding the book aloft, Tom began to recite the prayers his grandmother had taught him. As Tom's voice rose in prayer, the scarecrow recoiled, its glowing eyes flickering in what appeared to be pain. With each word of prayer that escaped Tom's lips, the scarecrow convulsed, its body racked with tremors. The glow emanating from its pumpkin head flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed around them. Finally, with a deafening crack and a shower of sparks, the scarecrow collapsed, its body crumbling inward like a deflated balloon. The glow that had animated it winked out, leaving behind only a pile of inanimate straw, cloth, and twisted branches. The storm, as if mirroring the creature's demise, began to subside, the wind dying down, the rain softening to a gentle drizzle. Tom, exhausted but exhilarated, stared down at the remnants of the creature that had terrorized his town. He couldn't believe it was over. News of the Scarecrow's demise spread through Hemlock Creek like wildfire. The Scarecrow Festival, once a symbol of joy and celebration, would forever be tainted by the memory of that night. The legend of the Haunted Scarecrow would live on, a cautionary tale whispered from generation to generation.